Alright, so we've done all our burnishing and we've made it to the fun part where we add our stencils. So I've just taken a piece of paper out of my sketchbook. Your paper doesn't have to be like super heavy duty and it doesn't have to be super light. You can use newsprint, which I actually think newsprint would work really well. Or you can be even more specific with your stencils and you can use masking tape. Just use your scissors or an X-Acto knife. At this point, you're just making a pattern that appeals to you and you think would be sort of cool looking. I am a big fan of this geometric feel that I'm trying to get in place. So basically, I'm just cutting out some triangles. I'm going to let it be freeform here. I'm just going to cut out a bunch of triangles and dip them in water. So basically, I just cut out my shapes and I'm just going to put them in that bucket of water and then use the water to adhere them to my pot. And after we've done that, I'm going to let them dry like that because I want my pot to be a little bit drier before I add on the next layer of Terracig, and that layer is going to be matte. So what we've done up till now is made our pots glossy. Our next move is going to make our pots matte, and we can do that pretty easily just by adding another layer of Terracig, because that Terracig by itself will fire to a nice matte color. Alright, we're all finished with that one. Let's do the little one so we can have like a fun little matching set. And then we'll set them aside to dry a little bit because I want them to be a little bit drier before we put on the next coat, because if we try to do the next coat immediately, what's going to happen is that Vaseline or any of those oils that we've put on prior are going to cause the Terra Sig we're going to paint on the sides to sort of like reject. It's kind of like oil in water, essentially. It is oil in water. I don't know why I said essentially. That's what it is. Alright, cool. So we've waited maybe a couple hours and we are ready to do the next step. I've decided I'm gonna continue this ombre thing, but like opposite. I've got that buff Terra Sig. I give it a good shake, and I'm gonna put that on the top half. Now, I'm only gonna put one coat on while we're on camera. I'm gonna let that dry a minute, and I'm gonna do a total of 3 coats. 3 coats, because I want it to be nice and saturated. And the more I let it dry, the more likely it is the next coat's gonna take really nicely. So we're gonna paint the first coat, and then we're gonna give it maybe like 10 minutes just chilling. I've got a fan on next to the table, so you can sort of do that at home. Don't leave the fan on it too long, because if it dries on one side more than the other, you're gonna have a bad time. But for this purpose of drying the Terra Sig, I'm only leaving it on for like a little bit. So I'm gonna do the first coat, and then we're gonna come back and do 2 more coats of whatever colors I add. We want it to be nice and thick and opaque. Now you can probably tell that my seams aren't going to be perfect because I didn't really give the edges of my paper that much attention. So if you really are like, I've got to have crisp seams, really wet those down and let them dry. Make sure you've got all those corners fully just coated. And it's important to remember, anywhere we do this second coat of Terra Sig is going to be matte. So the places where we've burnished are going to be glossy, and the places where we've painted on this Terra Sig are going to be matte. And like I said, I'm going to do this opposite ombre thing. So I've got some red Terra Sig. I'm going to do that on the bottom. Clean off your brushes before you trade colors. All right, now we're back. Look how nice and thick those are. We're going to take the paper off. So I've let these dry for maybe about 30-45 minutes under the fan. So they are fully dry. I'm going to use my needle tool, and I'm just going to pick at the edge of each of those stencils and just peel them off. It's pretty easy to do. Because we didn't use tape or anything, they should just pop right off. Remember what I said about those clean seams? That's okay. We can go back and fix it. Because nothing with clay is forever, especially if you haven't fired it yet. So we can go back and scrape off those cruddy looking parts and clean it up, and then hit it again one more time with the back of our spoon to reburnish those areas so we get that gloss back. So I'm not super worried about the edges right now. I just want to get those stencils off, and then I'm going to come back here in a minute and readdress the edges of my my picture plane. I think it's looking pretty cool. Sort of like a geometric 1980s Flintstone vibe. I think it's going to be pretty interesting because where that light brown is going to be orange. Where the dark brown is going to be black. And you've got the buff on the top. And I've tried to do sort of a nice blend in the middle. So hopefully we get a fun color shift right there. But sometimes clay is like combat, the stronger of the colors will win the day. And just remember that for, other things. If you've got pigments, for instance, and say you use something that's a bright blue, that bright blue will tend to eat up those other colors and be like, I'm going to be the only color. And the same thing goes for black and sometimes white. They don't really play fair as far as the color wheel goes. They tend to try to be the boss. That's I always wondered what my thinking face looked like, and there it is. That's my thinking face. So if that's my thinking face, imagine what your thinking face looks like. Boom, give it a spin. Like I said, you can always go back and clean up those edges, and that's what I'm doing right now. Got my little spoon, and I'm going to scrape away those excess bits and sort of clean up those lines. I'm also going to use my little wooden knife so I can get at those corners, those edges, because I don't want to mess up my pattern, but also I would love to just have a nice sharp triangle there. And look how easy it comes off, so I'm not even stressing. And realistically, you could also do this method the opposite way and put your lines down first and then put your stencils over those lines you want to keep and then burnish. There's nothing saying that you have to do it burnish first and then matte line work, because realistically you could also just put your matte down and put your stencil over the matte and then burnish. Voila, beautiful. I'm just adding some finishing details, cleaning up that neckline because I want it to be nice and clean. And just think about your tools when you're using. I'm using the edge of that spoon because it's going to work for what I need it to. It's not super sharp, so I'm going to cut my piece. And sometimes it's important while you're working to just take a step back, because when you're up in something and you've been working on it for hours, it's hard to keep perspective if you're constantly just staring at the same thing. So I've gone and cleaned up those line works and everything's looking really pretty tight. I'm probably going to let it dry a little bit and maybe go back and burnish it, but if you've gotten to this point and you're pretty happy with it, go ahead and call it. Put it on the drying shelf, put some plastic over it. You're done.